So what was our favorite Super Bowl commercial? But don't say the Super Bowl itself. That was pretty funny.
Sad.
The commercials weren't as good this year.
I didn't think so. They were all like, we're going to give it our best. And they had the Bears. We gave it all we had.
So nobody had a favorite Super Bowl commercial?
That and the Matrix one had me dying.
There was one on our TV, which we didn't know if it was just like us, where the commercial played halfway through upside down.
Oh, yeah. So that was halftime, right? I think right at the beginning of halftime. Yeah, that was a local. You know, they're like, oh, we spent $1 bazillion on it. I don't even know what it was. Was it a furniture store or something?
Like
Jewelry.
A pawn store.
Right. It was. Oh, yeah, and then they had the little kid, you know, diamonds are a girl's best friend, right? The end of it, I think, yeah. Well, that couldn't have been your favorite, just memorable.
Yeah.
Memorable. Yeah, I remember my wife and I were watching that. We're wondering if, like, okay, they just spent a bunch of money on this. Is this screwed up?
They might be getting a refund.
Like they flipped it last minute.
Yeah, right. So, no other favorites?
There's a funny one with the Muppets in it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
what was
That
it?
shit one had me laughing.
Yeah.
With Stephen Colbert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
There was a couple of different commercials like that were, like, commercials that were prequels for the next commercial.
Right.
Like the Stephen Colbert pistachio one was one of those, right? Where you had like a normal one. And apparently we weren't branded enough. So blah, blah, blah. And then there was the, was it the Ford one? The twice the fuel one where they had the next commercial is going to be twice as long and twice as awesome as this one, blah, blah, blah. I like the, actually, I don't think that was from this year's. Maybe it was last year's.
And the first Volkswagen commercial, I thought it was going to be like a movie trailer.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was from maybe it was last year's Super Bowl, but I was watching some show recently that, you know, best Super Bowl commercials of all time, and it was I think it was a FedEx commercial, and then they had they were talking about using like carrier pigeons for delivering like letters and stuff like that, and like, well, what about the big packages? And they had like these mutated pigeons with giant helmets on, and they're flying out the window, carrying me like, you know, like 2-ton crates, and then just dropping them on the street. I like that one. So I was on Facebook this morning, and a friend of mine was arguing. He was a Seahawks fan. I'm not a fan of either team, so I didn't care who won, but he was arguing that the Broncos played well, and that that the embarrassment was all forced by the Seahawks. Now, I think even if the Broncos had played well, I think the Seahawks, as good as they played, especially defense, I think they still would have won the game.
Yeah.
Probably by at least 10 points. I mean, that was just smothering defense. It was really amazing. I thought they played great. So taking nothing away from them, I think they were going to win the game. Playing like that, they were going to win the game regardless. But I don't think anybody could say the Broncos played well. He was using the argument that Manning had the most completions in Super Bowl history or something like that.
Yeah.
It was all he could do to throw these like little lateral passes before he got just dismembered by the defense. So, yeah, it was not a very entertaining game.
No.
I was pretty disappointed in it, and surprised. I really thought the Broncos were going to win.
I thought the Seahawks were going to win, but I thought it was going to be a lot closer than
Yeah.
43-8.
The best part was at the press conference when the guy brought up the 9/11 conspiracy.
I didn't hear this. What was that?
Some random guy ran up to the mic when Wilson was talking and was like, "We need to investigate 9/11, yada yada yada," and then people took him off the stage.
Look it up.
I really think Wilson should have got the MVP.
Well, he didn't do that much. They only had like 2 touchdowns on offense.
Well, that's fine, but I mean, I think he was the level-headed person that kind of glued the whole team together.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he didn't make the big plays, but he didn't make mistakes. Yeah, I don't know. I think he deserved the MVP. I think he played like a veteran in there rather than some defensive guy that had one big play, or 1.5 big plays, let's say. So, but in any case, I think the right team surprised me, but I think the right team won. I can't imagine anybody beating them the way they played. That defense was amazing. What if the Packers had that defense? What we need is that defense, Aaron Rodgers and Jordy Nelson. That's it. That's all we need. We'd be an unbeatable team.
But you need a tight end too.
No. Just Jordy Nelson. You don't think that would be a solid team? We don't need a tight end.
You gotta give Rodgers more than one target. Cause
No. I don't think Rodgers needs more than one target.
And I think he would.
Throw it to a linebacker. That's what the Bears used to do. The '85 Bears. You knew. How many of you were alive in '85? Okay, so the '85 Bears. You had you've heard the fridge, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you don't see that anymore. You don't see linebackers, actually running the ball. Every single time they had 4th and inches or 3rd down and 2 or something, you knew they were handing it off to the fridge. And he would just drag half the defense through over the first down line, no problem. I mean, the guy was how heavy was he when he played? 400 pounds probably.
Yeah, but you had to put him on oxygen after a run.
Who cares? Who cares? He earned his paycheck. Yeah, that guy was he was built like a dump truck.
Yeah.
It's like the whole same thing with Shaq. People question whether Shaq was one of the greatest centers that ever lived. I mean, fine, there's maybe better talented basketball players, but the guy was built like a dump truck. If you tried to block him, he would snap your arms off. We don't see aggression like that by the rim. I mean, he was ridiculous. I mean, anymore they have these unbreakable backboards, and he broke 6 of them during his career. You have a 320-pound guy who's 7 feet tall who turns around and he's on some sort of zebra testosterone or something. Who knows what he was shooting up? But now he's just fat like me. It's cool. Okay, so Microsoft stole Java. Now I was my own opening act there. Okay, so how Microsoft stole Java. What did we? I think we came up to talked about the different virtual machines and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so Microsoft decided they really liked this idea of Java and platform independence. What does platform independence mean? Write the program once and it'll run in any platform that supports a Java virtual machine. So Microsoft said, hey, we like this idea. And when Microsoft likes an idea, what do? Well, they take it. It's the American way, right? They steal what they want, get sued, settle outside of court, and everybody's happy. I mean, don't make Microsoft out to be the bad guy. It's the path of least resistance for them. What are they supposed to do? Go and ask? Hey, are you interested in selling this? No, this could be a big deal. It's okay, well, we'll give you a bunch of money. You spend 6 months arguing over it. Well, if they could just take it, get sued, settle with them, and everybody's happy. What's up?
Put out the product all the mentions in and make money right back.
Exactly. So anyways, Microsoft decided, hey, we're going to include in our Visual Studio product. Visual Studio is Microsoft's tool that is an IDE, Integrated Development Environment. Supports several different languages, and they added a new language called J++, which was Java syntax using Microsoft's own Java virtual machine that they wrote. Blah, blah. Okay. Well, makers of Java, which was Sun Microsystems at the time, now Oracle. This is not a small company. This is not like Microsoft going in and stealing something from Bob, the software developer, who wrote some cool game in his underwear in his grandma's basement. Okay, Sun Microsystems is a large software company, hardware company, have their own operating system called Solaris. Well, they had 2 operating systems. One was called Sun OS. The other one was called Solaris, both Unix-based operating systems. They did all sorts of server support. Large corporations to this day still use Sun servers as their web servers and stuff like that for their entire corporation. So Sun Microsystems decided, hey, we're not going to let Microsoft just get away with this. So, interesting factoid here. I don't think I talked about it last time. Sun Microsystems was a publicly traded company. So they were on the stock market and stuff, and their ticker symbol was Java. So interesting thing, like you can buy stock. Apple's ticker symbol is AAPL, that kind of stuff. Google is GOOG. Well, Sun Microsystems was Java. So they thought they were onto something with that. In any case, they decided not to roll over and play dead. They turned around, they sued Microsoft, and they didn't really have an interest in settling outside of court. So, they went back and forth, and in the end, Sun Microsystems won. They got some giant settlement, blah, 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 bunch of cash, and Microsoft had to remove the J++ product from their Visual Studio. So Microsoft went back to the drawing board. They really liked, let me look at this real quick. Just got to remind myself what I've shown you and what I didn't show you. Okay, got it. I teach the same material in a couple of different orders in a couple of different classes. So sometimes it gets confusing who I've shown this to and who I haven't. Okay, so C#. Microsoft decided, okay, fine, you got us. We won't use Java anymore, so we're going to go back and we're going to build a brand new language from the ground up. That was their big thing. This was back in the day when businesses bragged about programming languages. Okay, so they're going to build a brand new language from the ground up. I was at the ACM conference at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. This was, what year was this? 2000? 2001? Somewhere in that or early 2000s, possibly very early 2000s. So I was at this conference, and so this is all the computer companies, the tech companies. Okay, so like how Comic-Con is for games, or E3 is for games, big things like that, right? Okay, so ACM conferences is that for computers, computer technology. It's where all the cool kids are, right? Okay, well, so you have all the the mom and pop places and the the early video game makers, places that sometimes became famous. I think Square Enix was there. They weren't a big company at the time, but in any case, if you're one of these students going to this thing, you always got to go to the Microsoft's thing. Not because you like Microsoft, but because Microsoft's rich. That means they give away the best free stuff. Okay? One of the other people are just giving away like bouncy balls. That when you bounce them, they light up with like sparklers and crap. Okay. Now Microsoft, they were giving away box sets of Visual Studio Pro 6.0. It's a $700 software, free, handing it out the door. Just so happened we were about probably a year and a half into a new company called eBay. Oh yeah, room and board covered. So, of course, we all had already previously paid for our licenses for Visual Studio. So the thing is, they could have given out the student version. Student version was like $149 with a student ID. This was the student version. You couldn't create commercial software with. It's the same product, but this thing came with a legit commercial key that you could write commercial software with. This was probably one of the best giveaways in history. I bet you even to this day, this would be equivalent to you showing up to Microsoft's booth and them handing you an Xbox One with a couple of games. Except it was cheaper to ship. So, in any case, we went to Microsoft's thing. They were announcing a breakthrough programming language. They were building a brand new language from the ground up. And at the time, I was a big Java developer. So I had been writing Java since the day it was invented, I guess. It's very sad, actually, that I remember when some of these things were invented. I'm old. I never really thought of myself as old until like right now. I hate you. Okay, so anyway, it was the whole how many of you were alive in 1985 thing, and I saw 0 hands. There were 0 hands, right? Nobody in here was alive in 85? Man, I had a monstrous Garbage Pail Kid collection in 1985. And years of... So, the guy from Microsoft is up there. He's talking about this brand new language that is platform independent. Never before seen, blah, blah, blah. Platform independent. Showed us some syntax that looked shockingly similar to Java. But remember, it's brand new language built from the ground up that looks a lot like Java. But technically, the syntax was different than Java syntax. Now, just to give you a concept of this. Now, don't worry about what you're about to see too much, because it's some coding stuff that you won't see till next semester. Most of what we do in here is using a game engine, and we'll talk about that here in a moment. But we're going to look at the Hello World program, your first program you typically write in any language. Okay, so that's the Java version of Hello World. I think that's right. That's the C# version. Now, in all fairness, here, let me label these so we don't get confused. This is the Java version. And this is the C# version. Okay? Now, first of all, a little bit of truth in advertising here. We have to think about where these languages came from. Did we do any of that yet? Talked about the hierarchy of languages at all? In the beginning, we had a language called C. It actually really wasn't in the beginning, but somewhere in the 1970s, I think. It was a language designed for writing operating systems. Okay? So we had a language called C. Now, as an example, let's write the Hello World program in C. This is the old original C language. I think it's... Okay, so this is the Hello World program in C. Okay, let's make sure that works real quick. Yep, okay. So that's the Hello World program in C. From there, we had, now C was a procedural language. It was a strongly typed, compiled, high-level, procedural. Am I missing anything? General purpose programming language. That's what C was. So that was a language, remember when we had the telephone over here with just a pile of wires, that guy actually is a telephone, that kind of crap. So C was one of those. Then we decided, hey, you know, we really need to have an object-oriented version of C. Called that C++. Make sense? So, C++ version of Hello World. Oh, by the way, what you're seeing me do here, this is the VI text editor. How many of you have ever used the VI text editor? This guy predates mice. Not the squeaky run around the place mice, but the computer clicky mice. So it's a editor where all the it's made for people who touch type. So you actually issue it commands instead of clicking on the file menu and things like that. So here I'll kind of take you through that. So we're gonna write a C++ version of this program, hello.cpp. So notice I'm in here, down here at the bottom it says new file. If I want to type something, I have to first go into insert mode. So I have to hit I. Okay, so now I'm in insert mode. So we're going to include iostream.h. So instead of standard io.h, it's now iostream.h. This is C++. Then we can do int main, int argc. So to save it, I had to go into command mode. So I press escape. Then I put in a colon. And I put in a W to write. Then a Q to quit. So that guy's saved now. Uh-oh. Can't find iostream.h. Oh, hold on. Really?
Unique.h.
Yeah? This is upsetting.
There's supposed to be a space between the lines.
I don't think there has to be. Well, relatively unimportant. I probably just don't have some library installed here. In any case, this is a C++ version. Instead of standard I/O, we have this thing called iostream, which gives us this function called cout, which is a stream. And we're going to stream to that this collection of characters followed by the end line dealing. But now what's really interesting here is here I'll go ahead and grab this, put it into our let me do this. Hello. Good enough for right now. All right, so that is the C++ version of our program. Now notice how these guys have something in common with this guy up here. We have this thing called main, and up here in C++, main takes two parameters. It takes an argc and an argv. We're down here, we just taken one thing. We'll talk about those in a different class, but generally speaking, this is your command line arguments. It's your ability to pass stuff to the program when the program first runs. In older languages like C and C++, a array, which is what this guy is, this opening closing square bracket, they did not know how many elements were in them. So in an older language like C++, it had to figure out how many arguments did you give us, and here are the actual values of those arguments. So argv is the argument values, argc is the argument count, blah, blah, blah. But anyways, the important thing that I want to show you here is just the evolution of languages. Okay, so we have C++ up here, moving to our Java equivalent and C# equivalent. All right, so we see that in these languages, things have streamlined somewhat. First of all, we didn't need the include statement up here because Java and C#, they built in standard input-output libraries into the core language. You didn't have to do anything special. And then they took away some of the other syntax-y type things. Unimportant, but in our story, it was a decent opportunity to just show you the evolution of languages here. So back to this slide. I'm going to move the C++ over a little bit here. Because Microsoft and Apple were such friends, right? Back for the early days, Apple and Microsoft been buddies, best buddies. So when they were both using the C language and then the idea of object-oriented languages became popular, Microsoft decided, we're going to get behind C++. Apple said, well, if you're getting behind C++, we're not going to get behind C++. So we're going to get behind a language called ObjectiveC, which is another object-oriented language. Built off of C as the base. So to give you the ObjectiveC version, actually the ObjectiveC version of Hello World is identical to the C++ version of Hello World. Literally the same. I don't have to change anything. So there's the ObjectiveC version, assuming that works. You know, this is pissing me off. Hold on a second. I wonder if it's my IO stream. I wonder what the deal is there. I promise you that's correct code, so I must be using the compiler incorrectly. It's definitely user error on my part, but not the programming side of it. All right, so anyways, from C, we came up with our object-oriented languages, C++ and ObjectiveC. From there, we got Java, and J++, lawsuit, C#. All right, so off of C++, we got Java, which at first a lot of people referred to it as C++++. Concept behind Java was, besides the platform independence crap, it was that a lot of the things that you could do in C++, a lot of things that C++ let you get away with that never made sense, Java kind of fixed and kind of forced you into doing it in the correct way. C# was Microsoft's answer to Java after they lost their lawsuit, and it has very much become a if not, actually, I would say more than a true competitor. I would say C# has probably become the industry-leading object-oriented language. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in a few minutes, but let me show you the C# model, first of all. First, I want to bring this guy over. So, this is the Java model. Okay? Let's look at how C# works. Have our C# source code. We then compile it. It compiles down to something called missile code, Microsoft Intermediate Language. Okay, so both of those guys are low-level intermediate languages, whether you're talking about Java bytecode or missile code. So far, we're talking about the exact same thing, right? Okay, ultimately, what is missile code? Missile code is an executable for the .NET component architecture. Still the same thing, right? So we have the Windows .NET component architecture. What does this guy do? Translates it to x86. And an executable for Windows. All right, so let's go back to this slide. This slide says C# is a brand new language built from the ground up. It's not Java, we promise, even though the source code looks shockingly similar. They're both compiled. They both compile down to an intermediate language. They both are executables for some virtual machine. One's called the JVM, the other one's called .NET. They both run on Windows. That virtual machine translates to x86, and they both run natively on Windows. Don't these look like the same language? I mean, what was the big deal with Java? Is that it was platform independent, right? Well, I'm sitting there at that ACM conference, and the guy's up there saying, hey, we've come up with platform independence as well. In fact, C# is better than Java. Not only is it platform independent, but it actually runs natively on the hardware. Why is that? Because this guy, this translation, is done through something called a JIT, a just-in-time compiler. And what the JIT does is only the very first time you run your program, it goes and it changes it to an executable that's native for Windows. So each additional time you run your program, it will run as a native application right off the bat. Where Java always translates. It always runs as an interpreted language at runtime. Well, Java doesn't run as an interpreted language. Java bytecode runs as an interpreted language. It's a low-level language and gets interpreted to another low-level language. What's a low-level language? One-to-one relationship with the CPU. The magic tricks on the CPU. Okay? So C# seems pretty legit, right? But it also seems exactly like Java, which is a small little upgrade, which Java then later on introduced. Java said, hey, you know those just-in-time compilers? Decent idea. We're going to do that too. Okay, so they adjusted their Java virtual machines. Now, back to our C# slide here. The guy standing up in front of us, and he's saying, okay, so C#, brand new language. We're really excited about this. We lost millions of dollars, and that's why we have to do this. He didn't actually say that part, but I filled in the blanks. So he said, C# is platform independent, as long as you have the .NET component architecture. Which, when you translate that, it's platform independent. That is, it'll run on any platform, as long as it's Windows. Any platform. Name a platform. As long as it's Windows, it'll run on there. Okay, because Microsoft never ported the .NET component architecture to other platforms, like Mac or Linux, which is why I have omitted these additional columns here from this. Okay. Now, if Microsoft were to port the .NET component architecture over to those, then it would be platform independent, just as Java is. But C# has an eye towards performance that Java does not. And because of that, .NET, the .NET component architecture, is a little bit different than a virtual machine. Why is that? It's because Microsoft knows all the ins and outs of the operating system it's running on. So they can write that just-in-time compiler so that at runtime, the very first time, it translates it into a whole bunch of native code that run quickly. That makes sense? So I don't want to give C# a bad name here, because C# is actually a very good programming language. It takes all the good stuff from Java, makes it very, very, very Windows friendly to begin with, okay? But doesn't have the downside of performance, slow performance. Slow is all relative, but you get what I'm saying. So the only real issue I have with C# is to call it platform independent is a stretch. Seeing as though Microsoft had no plans of porting the .NET component architecture to other operating systems, and even if they did plan to do it, they wouldn't have been able to do it at the level they could, at the quality they could do it on Windows, because they controlled both sides of the coin. They controlled the operating system. That makes sense? Okay, so nothing wrong with C#. In fact, C# today is one of our big three. We have three popular languages in the world today. Popular, general purpose, high level, object-oriented, blah, 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 strongly typed programming languages. Those languages are Java, C#. I mean, Apple needs to keep up with the times, right? ObjectiveC 2.0. Isn't it funny how Apple sometimes comes up with really interesting naming conventions for stuff, and then the other times they come up with really boring naming conventions? Like, take their operating systems, for example. How many of you are Mac users in here? Okay, 1.25 people? That's about right. Microsoft has something like 95% of the... actually, they've been losing. I think they're at about 93% market share now. Something like that. So I think it's clear Windows will never lose the desktop market share. Desktop will just go away, and then there'll be mobile, and then Microsoft's less popular there. But Microsoft has clearly won that Super Bowl, right? Okay, so in any case, so you look at the history of the operating systems for Macintosh. We had OS 6, OS 7, OS 8, OS 9. Those were all crap. Okay? All those operating systems were complete garbage. Now, Apple is kind of famous for what? What would you say Apple's famous for? Innovation, maybe? It's kind of their thing. And expense. So they're expensive, but they're innovative. That's kind of Apple's thing, right? Okay. OS 6, 7, 8, and 9 were complete garbage. I had a Mac back then. I had a Mac, I had a Windows machine, I had a Linux machine. I was super geek. Made them all hook up together and print to a printer, and when you weren't supposed to, and that was my hobbies. So in any case, it wasn't uncommon for me to turn my monitor on in the morning for my Mac and see like the screen looks fine, the mouse moves around and stuff like that. Yet the clock says like it's like 2:13 a.m. Totally not 2:13 a.m. That's the time that the machine crashed. Okay, so the Macintosh operating system was actually really unstable back then. People have complained for years that that Windows is crappy, blah, blah, blah. Well, those of you who are running, probably most of us are Windows 7 now. A couple of us are probably Windows 8. How many of you are Windows 8? How many are Windows 7? Almost half and half. Okay. Both of those are built on the NT kernel, which came out with, actually was created in Windows 2000. Which was not a consumer operating system. Windows 2000 was a desktop or an office-based operating system, a business operating system. But in any case, very stable operating system. Your machine does not crash that often, right? Running Windows 7, Windows 8. I mean, sometimes you got stupid issues and stuff like that, but don't knock Microsoft. They're solving a really hard problem. They're writing a piece of software for 1 million different computers. It's shocking it works as well as it does. Our only real complaint about Microsoft in the recent history was Vista. And it wasn't that Vista was a bad operating system. It was just annoying. People didn't have crash problems with Vista. They just didn't like how chatty Vista was. She got a little mouthy, right? Like, are you sure you want this? No, are you positive you want to do this? Okay, so nothing wrong with Vista except that it was inconvenient to use because it would piss you off. And then you throw your computer and your computer would crash because you caused physical damage to your computer. It's just the way it works. But I can make a pretty decent argument now that the Macintosh operating system is a little more stable than the Windows operating system. But it's not because Apple had that much to do with it. Apple decided, you know what, our operating systems really, really suck. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to go out and steal an operating system. So Apple went out and they took an operating system called OpenBSD, a Unix-based operating system. Unix operating systems have been around forever and ever and ever. Stress tests by scientists, blah, blah, blah. Pretty stable. Okay. Apple took an existing, very, very, very time-tested, stable operating system, put a pretty front end on it, and called it what? Mac OS 10. Or Mac OS X. Does the X stand for 10? Does it stand for the X in Unix? Who knows? And they put a nice Macintosh front end on it and called it Aqua. And that's what we have today. They stuck with it, right? Because now all the Apple operating systems are 10 point something about this Mac. OS X version 10.9.1. And then they kept naming them after cats, right? You had lion and mountain lion and cougar, and they didn't have a cougar, but you get what I'm saying. In fact, Apple had a funny joke in this last year's Worldwide Developer Conference when they announced the new operating system. This one's called 10.9 Mavericks. They ran out of cats. But they had a funny joke in their keynote where they said, maybe we call it sea lion. They showed a little sea lion bouncing a ball. The ball kind of looked like the spinning thing when your Mac is dying. Okay. So in any case, it's interesting how Apple comes up with really inventive names for some things, and then just boring. Like, how many of you are iPhone users? So we had iOS 1, iOS 2, iOS 3, iOS 4, iOS 5, iOS 6. Oh, and the earth-shattering iOS 7. At least Android is inventive. I'm an iPhone user, so I'm an equal opportunity knocker, right? Android, you got Jelly Bean, you got ice cream sandwich. That just makes you hungry. Right? All right, so we'll pick up next time. We'll talk a little bit more about C#. I will probably give you another homework assignment on Wednesday, but I don't like to give you another one until you've seen my grading style for the previous one. So in any case, I'll have all those graded hopefully tonight. Those of you who got an email from me yelling at you, check back tomorrow morning. I will update your grade, but I'm still upset. Follow instructions next time. I'll see everybody on Wednesday.